Hi friends, welcome back to Hebraic Creations. Last time I told you we would look at the two fatal errors in our modern Bibles that have confused our understanding of Yeshua's ministry. I'll again reference the Chronological Gospels by Michael Rood and the Sons of Zion versus the Sons of Greece by Dr. Miles Jones. Okay, these two fatal errors can be attributed to Eusebius. Remember, he's the guy who proposed Yeshua's ministry was 3.5 years. Yet, every early church father either clearly stated Yeshua's ministry was about 1 year, or they never contradicted that it was about 1 year. Even Yeshua said he came to preach the acceptable year of the Lord. That's in Luke 4:19. His 1 year ministry prophetically fulfilled the Torah requirement that a Passover lamb must be a 1-year-old male. That's in Exodus 1:5. John the Baptist called Yeshua the Lamb of God who came to take away the sins of the world, signaling that the 1 year commenced with Yeshua's baptism. That's in John 1:29. See how the Moedim prophetically point to Yeshua as Messiah, as long as nobody is tweaking the word with additions and omissions. So why did Eusebius make this wild 3.5-year claim when 1 year was the accepted belief? He was Constantine's pet biographer, and Constantine had this grandiose idea that he was on par with Yeshua. If you viewed Constantine as a type of Antichrist, Eusebius was his false prophet, doing everything he could to deify this narcissistic murderer, even if it required tweaking the scriptures. Constantine's divinity was dependent on Daniel's 70th 7-year prophecy being fulfilled so Rome could claim, well, the Torah and the prophets have served their purpose. They can be set aside now. Constantine wanted the covenant with Israel to be made null and void so he could lead a new religious system based in Rome. He actually considered himself the conquering King Messiah who had returned in absolute power to rule over all the kingdoms of the earth as Vicar of Christ. So now that we know the motivation behind this deception, let's consider how Eusebius propagated this flagrant lie. This is where the two fatal errors come into play. There's evidence that Eusebius may have fabricated two Passovers in the Gospel of John to artificially lengthen the Gospel timeline by 2 years. In John 6:4, a phantom Passover was added. In John 5:1, a Passover was falsely interpreted. It was really Pentecost. These two bogus Passovers added 2 years to Yeshua's 1.5-year ministry, giving us the 3.5-year error we are still being taught today. We know these are illegitimate Passovers when we study the Hebrew context and the early manuscripts. So let's look at the first fatal error in John 6:4. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. This phrase is not found in Matthew, Mark, or Luke, only in John. However, this phrase was not found in 2nd and 3rd century copies of John, but it was found in John after the 4th century, which is when Eusebius entered the picture. Also, I pointed out in a previous video with the Ramadan illustration, we can sniff out Greek insertions by the language being used because no Hebrew would say Feast of the Jews when talking to a fellow Jew. Additional clues that show us that John 6:4 is a fabrication are found by looking at context. The first clue, remember how Jewish males must appear in Jerusalem for Passover, Pentecost, and tabernacles? If John 6:4 was really Passover, Yeshua should have been en route. Instead, he was hanging out in the Galilee feeding the 5,000. This is a serious Torah violation. The second clue, the feeding of the 5,000 is the only event found in all 4 Gospels. The other 3 Gospels confirm that this occurred at the end of the summer, and this feeding was exactly 17 days before the Feast of Tabernacles, which is a fall moed, not spring as one would expect with a supposed Passover. The third clue, Yeshua was feeding the 5,000 leavened bread. The 7-day feast of unleavened bread comes right after Passover. So a Torah observant Jew would never serve leavened bread. We know this is leavened bread by the Hebrew word lechem versus motzi or matzah. This vital clue was previously hidden from us due to Greek translations. The fourth clue, 2 days after, Yeshua taught in the Capernaum synagogue. Was this gathering of men ignoring the required appearance in Jerusalem too? The fifth clue, Yeshua read the Torah passage relevant to the Day of Trumpets, which preceded the Feast of Tabernacles in the fall. Yeshua did not read a passage coinciding with Passover. The sixth clue, just 3 days later, Yeshua was feeding the 4,000 with more leavened bread. If the Jews were in the midst of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, no Torah-observant Jew would do such a thing. Seventh clue, a group of Pharisees arrived to challenge Yeshua. They complained about his followers not washing their hands before eating bread. This rule's not in the Torah. It's one of their additions or made-up laws, those laws that Yeshua constantly challenged. If it was truly Passover, the Pharisees would have been more concerned about Yeshua serving unleavened bread and not appearing in Jerusalem. The eighth clue, these ultra-Orthodox Pharisees should have been in Jerusalem themselves if it was really Passover, not in the Galilee quizzing Yeshua. The ninth and final clue that proves that John 6:4 is totally a phantom Passover is the subsequent year of complete and total silence from the gospel writers. That's a lot of contextual evidence that has been overlooked because of Greek-tinted glasses. Now let's look at the second fatal error in John 5:1. Let me read. After this, there was a feast of the Jews. Again, this shows a Greek insertion because no Hebrew would say feast of the Jews when speaking to fellow Jews. And again, if you look at context, the evidence shows this has to be Pentecost. Otherwise, we're looking at yet another year of total silence from the gospel writers. So to recap, adding these 2 phantom Passovers and 2 ridiculous years of gospel silence, Eusebius increased Yeshua's 1.5-year ministry to 3.5 years. He still needs another 3.5 years to arrive at the 7 years that fulfills Daniel's 70th 7 year. Well, that was borrowed from Peter's vision in the book of Acts, about the unclean animals. Apparently that happened 3.5 years from the time of Pentecost in Acts 2. Now with these 7 counterfeit years in hand, Eusebius supposedly satisfied Daniel's final 7 years and neatly laid the groundwork for the dangerous replacement theology using Peter's vision, which is still wrongly cited as permission to eat unclean flesh, allegedly proving that Yehovah revoked the Torah, nullified the covenant, and gave the church to the Romans. Wow. That should give you a lot to ponder. Until next time, when we talk about the Jonah prophecy, it is the final nail in the coffin of this contrived 3.5-year ministry timeline. Stay tuned. Shalom.